profit. So that's what we like about apartment buildings. Also, today, and in typical markets, financing is available at attractive rates. Now, there has not been a lot of bank capital or lending capital available for investment properties for a little while. And I have to tell you that this year, that has begun to shift. 2009 to 2010, I did not see any deals get funded through banks. Investment properties, commercial properties, in my own personal practice. I have seen a few banks make loans on apartment buildings this year, and more of them are coming back, advertising their apartment loan products, contacting me as a broker investor and saying, hey, what do you got? And I've seen a few deals, like I said, this year get done. So I'll give you an example. One of my clients refinanced his 81-unit building using, it's a Fannie Mae loan. It's insured by Fannie Mae. I think the lender was Greystar. He refied that property at a 4.6% interest rate, fixed for 30 years. The term is 10 years, but the rate is fixed for 30 years, 4.6%. So attractive financing. You're not going to find that on a retail office property. If you're going out and if you're aggressive and you're buying a company, you want to go buy a business, you're definitely not going to find those type of rates. So apartment buildings have some advantages. Also, apartment buildings versus a single-family resident, you're going to have economies of scales that SFR single families do not have. Now, don't let me discourage you from buying a house if you're looking at buying a house, because oftentimes a house, a single-family home, could be a good starter, especially in this market right now because the prices are so low and the income is good. However, when your tenant moves out of a house or your condo, you are now 100% vacant. Now, you should be able to rent it out pretty quickly, but for that period of vacancy, you have no income coming in. With an apartment building, you have multiple units. So if someone moves out, the other tenants, there's income coming from the other tenants that allow you to pay the bills and the mortgage, if you've done the numbers right. But that's critical. If you're owning single-family homes for the purpose of income versus, now if you're flipping single-family homes, you don't have to worry about holding it. But if you're if you buy a single-family home for the purpose of holding it for the income, you have to be prepared for that month or 2 months maybe even of vacancy where you have no income coming in. So that's where reserves are important. We'll talk about reserves. But apartments, multifamily property gives you economies of scale that single-family homes don't have because of the multi-family dwellings. Okay. Also, and I think real estate in general, but since we're talking about apartments, is an excellent generator and then preserver of wealth. So if you're trying to build wealth, apartment buildings allow you the opportunity to generate passive income and also equity buildup and hopefully appreciation of the asset, which builds income, generates income. And really any property can do that. But then also, I think where apartments come in over some of the other real estate categories in terms of when we're talking about preserving wealth. So there's generating wealth and then preserving wealth. Apartments are great for both, but when we're talking about preserving wealth, apartments do a lot for your capital when you're trying to preserve it because, number one, of the cash flow. So the cash flow coming in should be a hedge against inflation. I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to get into the inflation numbers and all that type of stuff, but we're expecting some inflation here in the near future. And so I've heard that a few different places. So when you have income coming in, and you should be making, right now, you should be making at least around 10% on your money. If you're doing an income property in the Bay Area, target making at least 10% on your money. And so that income that's coming in, it should be beating inflation, no matter how bad it gets. You should be able to beat it with the income, just simply with the income. So what you also have the ability to do is the equity buildup. It's small, but every time you make that mortgage payment, and the tenants basically are making your mortgage payment, you're paying down that mortgage, you're building up your wealth, okay? Hopefully, appreciation is not something that we can control when we're talking about the marketplace, but appreciation is something we can control when we increase the income, and we'll go into that. But apartments help you to generate wealth, but they also help you to preserve wealth, okay? And then there's a lot of different reasons why, and we can go into all that, but understand that the income that comes from the buildings are critical to helping you to build wealth, but also helping you to keep it. Prices right now, I'll end with this and we'll go on. Prices right now country, but in the East Bay, have dropped more than 50% in some areas. Some areas have been hit really bad. The prices, however, the rents right now are about where they were at their peak, and they're rising. So the prices are down, but the rents are basically still where they are. So, and the occupancy rates are getting stronger, and the fundamentals are we're not building a lot of apartment buildings. There's a lot of people who've lost their homes are now in the rental market, and we can't build apartment buildings or really a lot of stuff right now because the cost of construction is higher than the value of the property. So therefore, rents are starting to rise. So another reason why multifamily property is a great investment. All right. So we've made the decision to invest in multifamily, or we want to get involved. Now what? Okay. Here's some key indicators when you're looking at properties. First thing I would say, obviously, everybody, you have to have your own internal plan. Have some sort of plan for what you have, some goals. That's critical. But once you figure out where you are and what you want, when you're going out and looking at property, there are some critical things you want to evaluate. First and foremost is the cash flow. Okay, you want to make sure a property generates cash flow going in. All right, so because if it's not generating cash flow going in, you have to be able to sustain that negative. Okay, and so that negative cash flow, it's just tough. You don't want to be feeding the property. You want the property to feed you. So make sure that there's cash flow, and we'll go into how we evaluate that. The NOI detail, and the NOI stands for net operating income. So we want to understand what our net operating income. I'll go into how do we get there. But that net operating income, understanding how we got there, do we think it's going to grow? Can we grow it? That's critical. Okay. The price. That's where negotiation skills come in. That's another thing that makes real estate great, is because there's no sticker price. There's a list price, but there's no, that's not the end all be all. You make the price what you want it. Now, certain properties you have to outbid other people. Certain properties, obviously, within reason, you have to. If you want a property, you have to, write an offer or make a counter offer that's going to be attractive enough to that seller so you can buy the property. But bottom line is you have the ability to negotiate. So and we'll talk about, the NOI affecting your ability to negotiate in the escrow. Okay, the rent roll in apartment buildings, the rent roll represents who your tenants are, what units they live in, what their security deposit is, when they moved in, when they are scheduled to move out. That's critical. Analyze, and the reason that's critical, you want to make sure you have long-term tenants, you have short-term tenants, you have a mix of both. When are most of the leases turning over? Those type of things are critical. You want to understand them. All right. And then something that we talked about a little earlier, cash on cash return. That is key. Whatever cash you put into the deal has to generate a return annually. And like I've said, I think right now a good minimum is 10% if we're talking about Bay Area. If you go out of the state, you should be getting at least 12 to 15%. But if you're in the Bay Area, you look at now, if you're buying in San Francisco, if you're buying in Silicon Valley, you're probably not going to get 10%. Now, again, if you're preserving wealth, you're probably going to buy in San Francisco or Silicon Valley. If you're wanting to generate wealth, you're probably better off buying here in the East Bay where the prices are lower. Okay, there's a difference, and there's an argument for both and different reasons for both. But just understand that cash flow and cash on cash return is critical. All right, so let's start when we're evaluating the property. The first thing we want to look at is the income, right? We want to make sure that and when I say income, that's derived from the rents. All right, so when we're analyzing a building, we're going to look at what's called the gross schedule rents. That's the potential achievable rental income. That's what is the market rent for each unit? And in the ideal world, if everybody paid their rent, that's what that would be. Gross schedule rents. That's our top line number. Now we want to start taking away from that basically. So we take away from the gross schedule rents our vacancy factor. All right, the vacancy factor is going to vary from market to market. Right now in the East Bay, in Oakland, we have a 4.6% vacancy rate for the city. Now, you go by the areas by the lake, there are virtually no vacancies. Certain parts of East Oakland, you have